Coming up, Indigenous people from all over the world will be in New York City soon for a critical session at the United Nations. A new report challenges how the federal government collects data on Native Americans. And we learned the story of Miguel Mack, an Indigenous person who hasn't been heard from since late February. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amarawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. We start north of the medicine line in Canada, where Indigenous leaders want more answers about the death of a First Nations woman. The body of Linda Mary Beardy was discovered at a landfill just outside of Winnipeg on April 3rd. Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smith said Beardy was seen climbing into a dumpster, but not seen getting out before she was discovered at the dump. Although the cause of death is still undetermined and toxicology tests have not been completed, officials concluded there was no evidence of foul play. That narrative is not matching up for Indigenous advocates who say the investigation was not thorough enough. Chief Chris Traverse of the Lake St. Martin First Nation challenged the investigation's conclusion, calling it discriminatory to insinuate the young mother passed out. Beardy's body is the latest found in this notorious area nicknamed the Brady Landfill. Another Indigenous woman's partial remains were found at the same site earlier this year. On Monday, the city of Winnipeg confirmed the Brady Landfill has been reopened. In New Mexico, a federal grand jury has indicted a man in connection with the 2021 disappearance of a Native woman. Federal prosecutors allege that in 2021, Preston Henry Tolth assaulted 62-year-old Ella Mae Begay and drove her vehicle across state lines. Last week, the indictment against Tolth was unsealed, charging the 23-year-old with assault and carjacking. The Native woman's truck was last seen leaving her home in the remote community of Sweetwater on the Navajo Nation on June 15, 2021. Begay has not been seen or heard from since. At last week's hearings, Begay's family pleaded with the defendant to reveal the location of her body. Tolth has been denied bail and ordered to remain in custody pending trial. Prosecutors say the indictment marks an important step in determining the truth about what happened to Begay. In Alaska, a group of Native men are being honored 67 years after a heroic rescue. In 1955, 16 Alaska Native Scouts recovered U.S. crewmen after they crash-landed on St. Lawrence Island in a remote part of the state. The Navy plane holding 11 men was shot down by Soviet fighter jets. A group of Yupik Friends who happened to be in the National Guard's 1st Scouts unit were hunting for eggs when they spotted the crash. Together, they assisted the crewmen with medical attention and alerted military authorities of their safety. To honor their achievements, sole survivor Bruce Bulawin and the family members of the 15 other Scouts were recently presented with Alaska Heroism medals. The honor recognizes those who display heroism beyond the call of duty. Well, the name of a popular Indigenous chef has been added to a prestigious list. Time magazine has recognized Sean Sherman as one of its 100 most influential people in the world in 2023. Sherman, also known as the sous chef, spoke to ICT exclusively about the honor.
Still trying to understand how that makes me feel, and because it's just a lot to unpackage there. And because for me this work isn't really about myself, or it's not an ego project, but all of this attention definitely helps us open doors, especially for the work of the nonprofit we're doing, which is just trying to create less hurdles for people to do the same work, to get more Indigenous foods out there, to see healthier foods being served to our communities, and just more access to this, and so much more education about it in general. So all this just keeps helping us move forward as an entire Indigenous community.
Sherman has been a leading force in the movement to bring Indigenous food systems back. He does this through culinary creations, organizing with other chefs, and now by influencing policy on a national scale. Sherman has won multiple awards, including the 2022 James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in America. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. There is a question often asked: what does the data say about Indigenous communities? That's kind of a trick question because the federal definition of data uses two main elements, race and ethnicity. That does not always work for people with a political classification like citizenship and tribal nations. ICT's Mark Trahant talks to Rob Maxim about a new report by the Brookings Institution that examines this problem and proposes solutions.
Rob, thank you for joining us. Let's start with the way the federal government now defines Indigenous people. Directive number 15 from the Office of Management and Budget.
Yeah, that was a point that we spent a lot of time thinking about, and it gets complex, right? And so starting from right at the beginning, the idea of just the definition of how the U.S. thinks about American Indian or Alaska Native, which I'll collectively refer to as Native Americans, right? The federal government itself defines American Indian or Alaska Native as the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America. So because of that, there are a bunch of complex dynamics that end up getting raised by that. The first is you have individuals from the various Indigenous peoples outside of the modern U.S., being counted as American Indian or Alaska Native. There's the dynamics around who were modern day Native nations originally colonized by. In many cases, they especially in the West, had tribes colonized by Spain originally, and then later the U.S. came along. So that plays into a lot of the dynamics around Latino or Hispanic identity in Indian country. And then in general, there's still the ongoing kind of tension between Native Americans as a racial group and then Native Americans as a political and legal identity. And all of that gets mixed up here. And the way that the U.S. collects and publishes data doesn't account for really any of those nuances.
As we get into this global economy and demand to shift to a green technology, so many of the minerals are within the lands where many of those definitions actually apply.
Yeah, they're not only within tribal lands, but they are adjacent to. And so that's, another kind of challenge is a lot of land today isn't considered Indian country because, maybe it's locked up in a national monument or national forest or national park. But at one point, to many, it still is, right? Like this whole country, really the whole continent was and is Indian country. And so that's part of the challenge here too. There's this tension between who's counted as Native American, who isn't, what is tribal land, what isn't, who's living on tribal land and who's not. And all of that continues to be in tension.
I'm interested in the solutions that you proposed.
Yeah, we talk about a couple. I think in the immediate term, just on the data side, we recommend that government agencies take steps to publish more comprehensive data around Native American populations. So, for example, a lot of government agencies right now publish data just on single race alone Native Americans. And so that covers anywhere from 23 to 39% of Indian country if you're publishing that. So you're leaving out at least 3 out of every 5 Native people. The first step is we think that the federal government should consider also publishing data on Native Americans of all racial backgrounds, alone or in combination with another race. And then the second is looking forward to the 2030 census. We really suggest that the federal government consider delinking indigeneity from race. One way you could do that is to add, new questions to government forms asking about Native American citizenship or identity separate from that of race. Other countries already do this. Canada and Australia are two examples. But then finally, we note that the federal government really needs to do more to empower tribes themselves to collect and manage data around their own populations and territories. And that gets a little bit to what we were just talking about. Most data in Indian country flows through the federal government currently, which, at least in my opinion, is why government data doesn't do a great job of reflecting these complexities of Native American identity and existence in the US. So, in our view, to the extent that the US wants to truly support self-determination for tribes, that includes enhancing data sovereignty for tribes and allowing tribes to collect and manage data that's useful for themselves and not just the federal government.
Well, and even if you take that step of delinking race and, say, citizenship, then you're dealing with people who are single because they would be 100% a tribal citizen.
Yeah, well, and it leads to other challenges too. And this really, there are so many nuances here, right? And so just as one example, I'll use my own personal lived experience as an example here, right? So I grew up, I am a mixed race Native American. My dad is Wampanoag and my mom is white. And so I've been an enrolled citizen my whole life in our tribe. But even that wasn't enough because our tribe wasn't federally recognized until about 2 weeks before my 18th birthday. So I grew up in a dynamic where, most data sets were putting me into this 2 or more races category. I wasn't even being counted as Native American by, say, my school or something like that. But on top of that, the federal government itself didn't consider my tribe to be a legitimate American Indian tribe until, really right before I reached adulthood. And so there are many Native people in the US that are facing these tensions. And the way that the US government is thinking about, data, but also thinking about the nation-to-nation relationship with tribes really complicates this.
One example you cite in the study that really shows the harm from this is the study in the Lancet. And maybe talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there was back in 2015 a pretty seminal study that came out that showed that white Americans were suffering from a variety of what are now called deaths of despair at higher rates than other racial groups. These include things like alcohol overdose, suicides, drug addiction and opioids. And so that, really shaped a narrative. I think it was convenient at the time that narrative came out just as the Donald Trump campaign had begun. And there was a really strong narrative of, a group of white Americans that were suffering in ways that other Americans weren't. And so that's absolutely true that group is suffering. One of the key details about that study, though, is it didn't include any data around Native people. And so last year, a new study came out in the Lancet that looked at many of these same deaths of despair for not only white, Black, and Hispanic Americans, but for Native Americans as well. And when you do that, it turns out that Native Americans have been facing many of these same challenges at higher rates than any other racial group, including white Americans. And so it really puts a new look at this narrative that, white Americans are facing kind of these unique challenges because in many ways, they're the challenges that Native communities have been facing for so long. And the way that this relates back to data is when the CDC classifies its race data, it has to do so in a way that only really allows for single race data to be published. And so it's really easy when you do that to have a small sample size of Native people. And so researchers that aren't familiar with Indian country, they tend to just ignore, they will just take out Native people because the sample size is too small, or maybe it's too tough to work with, or maybe they just don't think it's important to report on Native people.
Rob, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. It was great to be with you.
In Canada, a missing young Indigenous man hasn't been heard from since February 27th. Ella Mae Sterling is heading up the search for his brother. APTN's Tina House has the latest.
Today, I believe we're going to head out down to Highway 8 towards Newayat reserve and check the rivers, the hillsides, and yeah, go from there.
Elijah Mack Sterling is Miguel Mack's oldest brother. He is heading up the search for his brother Miguel. 24-year-old Miguel Mack was last seen on February the 27th at this 7-Eleven convenience store in downtown Merritt, BC. Every day since he's been missing, family members and volunteers meet up at the family home to make a search plan. It's a daunting area to look, vast with mountainous terrain, rivers, creeks, swamps, and old abandoned buildings. Elijah says it's almost overwhelming to figure out what to do and where to go. This map shows areas circled in red, which have been searched already.
We get places of interest, and then we go there, we find nothing, and it's like, okay, back to square one. And then the next day we do something again, and it's like dead end, come back. So to keep coming back to this map, trying to figure out where to go next, it comes harder and harder every day.
Some days, 30 to 40 people volunteer to search for 24-year-old Miguel. But today, about 10 people have gathered at the family home, including Miguel's dad, Andrew Andy, who traveled here with his sister from Bella Coola to look for his boy.
Yeah, the challenge is, will I be the one to find him? And what will I find if, in fact, I do come across him? And am I mentally prepared to deal with it? So that sort of wades through your mind. And it's really a moment of growth spiritually, because you got to dig deeper than yourself. And, you know, it has physical challenges, but the mental challenges just to be out there.
Elijah is himself a young leader in the community. He says his background in administration and business helps him apply those skills to leading and organizing the search. And as we head out, I had a chance to talk with Elijah about combing these streets in downtown Merritt.
Just like any search, you know, you want to cover all grounds that, you know, are possible leads. We've hit up and down alleyways. Sadly, you know, Mom has checked through some dumpsters.
And as we travel a few kilometers out of town to the backcountry, Elijah says the possibilities seem endless of where his brother could be, and will they find him alive. He also has to contend with being a leader for this search and just being a brother.
Well, what makes it extremely challenging is that my brother and I, we grew up here. 20 years of our lives spent in these streets, whether it be swimming at the clay banks, part of town just over here, or going for a hike up this mountain here to the flagpole, going for bike rides.
So lots of memories growing up here, and obviously never thought here you'd be looking for your brother.
Sorry.
It's okay, I know this is very emotional. We really appreciate you doing this with us, Elijah.
I've been doing so well at keeping myself together. Yeah, just, you know, so many memories in this town.
And here at Spies Creek, after putting on hip waders and rubber boots, the search team prepares to search the water, and armed with long sticks, they poke at various places as they go, looking for anything that might help locate him. And for Elijah, he has another grim and difficult job, throwing an end of a rake attached to a rope and dragging the rope in the search of his own brother in the water. And for Miguel's dad watching from the bridge,
You do what you have to do. You know, if in fact we do find him, it really would help put closure.
and back at Miguel's mom's house, otherwise known as the command center, there is hope that this is the day they find Miguel, or clues about what happened to him.
I just want him to come home. I just want him home, and he's loved, he's missed, and his babies need him. We need him still.
If you have any information about the disappearance of Miguel Mack, you are asked to call the police. You can remain anonymous. Tina House, APTN National News, Merritt.
The United Nations will host its 22nd session of its Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues from April 17th to the 28th. The focus this year is human health and planetary health in the form of climate change. Joining us today virtually is Jeff Roth, who represents the United States in the body. Hi there, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Let's jump right in here. Give us a little bit of background on what the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues is.
Yeah, I first want to say that, I really appreciate all the work that ICT and the team and you have been doing for so long. I really am proud and that you're doing such a needed service. So I just want to say thank you for having us on. The Permanent Forum, I'm just starting my second term with the Permanent Forum, and we're an advisory body to the Economic and Social Council of the UN. Was established in 2000 with the mandate to talk about specific issues, including economic and social development, culture, education, environment, health, and human rights. There's 16 members on the forum. 8 of us are nominated by Indigenous organizations, and 8 of us are nominated by member states. I'm nominated by an Indigenous organization. All decisions in the forum have to be made by consensus, which can be very difficult when you have Indigenous peoples and governments being represented. But we do act in our own independent ability. So we don't have anything specific any specific roles that we have to play if we are a government person. This year, like you said, the theme includes human health and planetary health. And one of my most important things that I want to do is to address, the concerns that Indigenous people brought and bring to the forum every year. People travel thousands of miles to be there. I want to ensure that we provide recommendations to the ECOSOC and to the UN agencies and to the member states from Indigenous people and follow up on those recommendations and also work to promote assurances that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is respected for all of its protections in all member states and countries. And then also, one of the things that I'm really trying to work on is promoting the integration of Indigenous people's voices in the UN system at all levels. Personally, I tend to really bring attention to a subject that has also not had a lot of play over the years, and that's health of Indigenous people. So I'm also excited to be talking about health as well on the forum.
Give us some context for the significance of this upcoming gathering. You just mentioned recommendations, but is there any potential big news that we can expect to come out of the gathering?
Well, I would talk that the big news that I've been working specifically on includes the authoring of a report on Indigenous determinants of health. We'll be launching that report specifically on April 18th. Every year, the Permanent Forum is allowed to have 2 official member reports that are part of the record for the UN. And I was lucky enough to have my other members on the forum give me the opportunity, along with 2 other members, to write a report. The purpose of the report was to inform and solidify the UN agencies, including the WHO and member states of the UN, on the concept that Indigenous people must be approached differently from all other minority populations. We see this report that we put together as a guide and a toolkit for countries and UN agencies to begin to address the health and wellness of our Indigenous people. I'm really thankful in creating the report that the WHO worked very closely with us on this, and their Office of Social Determinants of Health shared a draft of an upcoming report that they're going to be putting out on the social determinants of health. So one of the sections of our report is specifically about mapping the social determinants of health that the UN recognizes, along with our Indigenous determinants of health, which will really help, I think, educate and train non-Indigenous people across the UN systems and across countries that haven't done a good job of approaching wellness for our communities.
For the folks who can't actually travel to New York, what ways do you recommend that they're keeping up with, this gathering that's happening very soon?
So, the last couple of years, we've been able to have a hybrid session because of COVID. And this year, we're going back to just a in-person session. So people only in person will be able to make interventions on the floor or make statements on the floor. The entire session, though, will be broadcast on UN TV, which is a television station within the UN. And so all sessions will be there. I also think that if you know people that are going, there's potentially an opportunity to have them, speak on your behalf if they can get an opportunity to do that.
Well, Jeff Roth, one of the members of the UN's Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.